You're listening to episode 568 of Unwelcome Guests, our 9/10 anniversary special edition. Now this will actually be mostly about the events of 9/11. I called it the 9/10 special edition to draw particular attention to what I think is one of the key circumstances which helps us understand what's going on. Now I called it a special edition because I'd make a special effort to make it approachable to new listeners. Now look at our 9/11 page, unwelcomeguest.net/911 will reveal about 50 episodes on the topic, so regular listeners are coming at this with a body of knowledge. So it's something of a challenge to make a show which is of interest both to regular listeners and to new listeners. But I wanted to have something that, if you're a regular listener, you might be able to point one of your friends to help them see what's going on. Now, I avoided listening to Lynn's talking about 911 for a couple of years because I thought, well, it's a complex matter and I don't know if it's a conspiracy or not, but I think people will probably work it out in the end. And when I did eventually catch up and listen to the 911 episodes, some of it was grim listening, but it did make perfect sense. So this is by no means a compendious and detailed look at 9/11, but we're going to catch up on some of the most important details, looking also at how it's been treated by commercial media. And we're going to start with the CBS Eye on America report about the events of Monday, September the 10th, 2001.
Pentagon. The day before 9/11, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld declared war, not on foreign terrorists.
The adversary is closer to home. It's the Pentagon bureaucracy.
He said money wasted by the military poses a serious threat.
In fact, it could be said that it's a matter of life and death.
Rumsfeld promised change, but the next day, the world changed. And in the rush to fund the war on terrorism, the war on waste seems to have been forgotten.
My 03 budget calls for more than $48 billion in new defense spending.
More money for the Pentagon when its own auditors admit the military cannot account for 25% of what it already spends.
According to some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions.
$2.3 trillion with a T. That's $8,000 for every man, woman, and child in America. To understand how the Pentagon can lose track of trillions, consider the case of one military accountant who tried to find out what happened to a mere $300 million.
We know it's gone, but we don't know what they spent it on.
Jim Minery, a former Marine turned whistleblower, is risking his job by speaking out for the first time about the millions he noticed were missing from one defense agency's balance sheets. Minery tried to follow the money trail, even crisscrossing the country looking for records.
The director looked at me and he says, "Why do you care about this stuff?" It took me aback, My supervisor asked me why I care about doing a good job. So
he was reassigned and says officials then covered up the problem by just writing it off.
They got to cover it up. That's where the corruption comes in. They've got to cover up the fact that they can't do the job.
The Pentagon's Inspector General partially substantiated several of Minery's allegations, but could not prove officials tried to manipulate the financial statements. 20 years ago, Pentagon employee Franklin C. Spinney made headlines exposing what he calls the accounting games. He's still there, and although he does not speak for the Pentagon, he believes the problem has gotten worse.
Those numbers are pie in the sky. The books are cooked routinely year after year after year.
Retired Vice Admiral Jack Shanahan commanded the Navy's Second Fleet the first time Donald Rumsfeld served as Defense Secretary.
With good financial oversight, we could find $48 billion in loose change in that building without having to hit the taxpayers.
In the 2.5 minutes since this report began, the Pentagon has spent nearly $2 million, and it may never know where 25% of those tax dollars went. In Los Angeles, I'm Vince Gonzalez for Eye on America.
Now, I don't watch a lot of television, and I certainly don't watch a lot of US television, so I don't know how much this was followed up either on the day or subsequently. Notice that they avoided talking about theft or misplaced money. They talked about waste the whole time. So while they were talking about that, did you imagine something like food that had been left out of the fridge and gone bad, so nobody can get to eat it? Well, that's a shame. All that money going to waste. Well, money doesn't work like that. If somebody got overcharged for 300 million, somebody got that 300 million. Does this perhaps explain why, although his charges were partially substantiated, people didn't say, gosh, you got a point here, we'd better get to the bottom of this? They transferred him and said, oh, well, we'll write this off. This is, on a larger scale, the same phenomenon that we saw about the US air conditioning tents to the tune of $20 billion a year without bothering to insulate them first. If you're a US taxpayer, you may be concerned about the fact that you're paying people to start wars and kill foreigners. Have you noticed that that's not even true about a large proportion of the money? If their internal accounts department says it's a quarter of the money, I can't believe it's less than that, and I can't believe it's not more than that, because it's very easy to do overbilling. This is a standard thing when you buy something. You agree a price and then you say, okay, how much should we put on the receipt? So does this money actually make America safer? Because a large proportion of it is getting squirreled away, put in the Swiss bank accounts of greedy opportunists, psychopaths, or whoever else. Now this seems like a pretty clear example of what Illich was talking about in Deschooling Society. The US military claims it's there to protect you and make things safer for Americans, but in practice they have a vested interest in starting wars. Now, as far as the timing goes, this is unexpected for a Monday. The admission that you can't account for a quarter of all the money that you've ever been given is, by anybody's definition, I would have thought, embarrassing. And the usual time for making such embarrassing announcements is, say, late on a Friday afternoon, or just before you nip off for a Christmas holiday, and then you hope it'll have all blown over by the time you get back. Okay, a pretty bold hope in this case, but hey, somebody got lucky, or was it just luck? Because the next day nobody was talking about the trillions of dollars that got stolen, unaccounted for. So, as a statistician, I've got to say yes, there is a chance that those who timed the September the 10th announcement had no idea about what was going to unfold on the next day. It just strikes me as about the perfect time to make such an announcement, if one had foreknowledge. Now, Donald Rumsfeld figures later on in the show, and of course we got a lot of evidence in earlier episodes that his role in this may not be benign. And now we can hear the soundtrack of a new video by Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. This is a group of 1,500 architects and engineers who are combined to say the official story is junk, we don't believe a word of it, and we would like an official investigation. Now, I should have said earlier, actually, this show has a web page, unwelcomeguests.net/568, where you can download the videos. So if you're listening on the internet, you might find that a superior solution.
Throughout the ages, architects and engineers have designed and built the great structures that have made our world and withstood the test of time. Hi, I'm Ed Asner. Welcome to Architects and Engineers. Let's look now at modern steel frame buildings. This is the Empire State Building, a marvel of modern architecture. It was built to last. Architects and engineers of today use computers to design and engineer buildings that will endure the forces of nature, such as earthquakes, fires, and hurricanes. This modern skyscraper was also built to last. We've seen buildings completely destroyed like this before, but only when done intentionally. Danny Jowenko is the expert on this in Europe. What did he say?
Dit is controlled demolition.
That's a controlled demolition.
Zeker weten.
You sure? Yeah,
Er
absolutely.
is nagesprongen.
It's been imploded.
Het is in opdracht gebeurd.
It's a hired job.
Het heeft een team gedaan van experts.
Done by a team of experts.
Explosives are used to demolish buildings like this in just seconds. Okay, so it's a controlled demolition. What's the problem with that? Well, it happened on the afternoon of 9/11 at the World Trade Center. Let's just think about this. Controlled demolitions cannot be engineered and rigged in a day. It takes months. And therefore, this event must have been planned in advance.
Keep your eye on that building. It'll be coming down.
Building is about to blow up. Move it back. We are walking back. It's a building about to blow up.
Did they actually use the word brought down, and who was it that was telling you this?
The fire department. And they did use the word, we're going to have to bring it down.
And these people heard explosions.
We heard this sound that sounded like a clap of thunder. It looked like there was a shockwave ripping through the building, and the windows all busted out. About a second later, the bottom floor caves out. The building followed after that.
Takes his hand off, and you hear 3, 2, 1, and it was boom, 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 boom.
And these reporters recognized it as a controlled demolition.
And I turned in time to see what looked like a skyscraper implosion. It looked like it had been done by a demolition crew. The whole thing just collapsing down on itself.
For the third time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
It was almost as if it were a planned implosion. It just pancaked.
So what's the problem if this was a planned demolition? Well, we are told by government agencies that this building came down as a result of normal office fires. The National Institute of Standards and Technology produced their final report in 2008.
World Trade Center 7 collapsed because of fires fueled by office furnishings. It did not collapse from explosives or from fuel oil fires.
But what do you think brought down the building?
And what caught my eye is more than 1,300 architects and engineers examined the evidence about Building 7's collapse and disagree with the official report issued by the National Institute of Standards and Technology. I certainly am much more open-minded about it than I was, and it is because of the involvement of the 9/11 families and all these engineers and architects.
You are about to hear from architect of 23 years, Richard Gage, AIA, member of the American Institute of Architects and founder of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. Now there are more than 1,500 architects and engineers who say that it could not have been brought down by office fires. They are backed by 9/11 family members who are calling for an independent, unbiased investigation.
I'm Richard Gage. Fires have never before caused the collapse of any skyscraper, even though there are numerous examples of much hotter, larger, and longer-lasting fires in these buildings. And in the case of Building 7, the fire that NIST said started the collapse had actually burned out over an hour before. It could not have caused the collapse, as NIST claims. Yet this 47-story, modern steel-framed skyscraper, which was not hit by an airplane, collapses mostly into its own footprint like a house of cards, as fast as a bowling ball falling off the side of the building, in just under 7 seconds. Listen to the experts.
Building number 7 descended in free fall for the first 100 feet, which means that there was absolutely no resistance to the descent whatsoever.
NIST has admitted it went into free fall for 8 stories. And going from motionless to free fall instantly, that's a bothersome part of the puzzle because NIST never explained it.
We've got a building that came down in its own footprint, so all of the columns really needed to be severed at the same time in order for that structure to fall the way that we saw.
The symmetry is the smoking gun.